Hello, everybody. I'm neuralsyn, and welcome back to the next episode in our series where we're taking a look at the auto-crafting dropper functionality as part of Nimbomb's carpet mod. In our previous episode, we took a look at pulse-based design and went ahead and built up this piston auto-crafter. That, of course, was built upon using these pulse generators over here, which generate 1, 2, and 3 pulses respectively, which correspond to 1, 2, and 3 items in the auto-crafting dropper. But there's one other type of pulse generator, which I thought was worthy of its own episode, and that's what happens when you face an observer into another observer and let it do its pulse. Now, if I slow the game down, and we'll slow it down to roughly half of the normal running speed, we take a look at this setup here, which is this sticky piston here, which has an observer on top, which faces into this other observer, which then powers this block here, which then indirectly powers this dropper full of gunpowder, which then points into the auto-crafting dropper, and of course the crafting table at the end. When we press this button, we can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pulses that actually happen. And as we would expect, if we take a look in the dropper, we see that there are, in fact, 6 items. And this builds upon the principle from the very first episode where items that flow into the auto-crafting dropper do so in a sequential manner. And so for every pulse in our 6 sequential pulses, 1 slot was taken up by the gunpowder. So why is this useful? Well, it's useful because there are certain crafting recipes, such as, well, the obvious being a trapdoor, which this corresponds directly to that crafting recipe, but that's not particularly interesting. There's crafting recipes like this for TNT, which require this checkerboard pattern sort of layout. Now, one thing that we could do is alternate between the individual item pulse generators, so we could go 1 pulse, then 1 pulse, and then repeat 1 pulse, and do that 5 times here. That's not particularly efficient. So what we can do is use this 6 pulse generator to our advantage, and with a little bit of layout reconfiguration, and so really what I'm going to do here is just change the orientation of some of these droppers. So this dropper is going to point into this dropper, and we'll move the crafting table over here. We throw in another dropper that's attached to the block, meaning that when this observer fires its 6 pulses, or pulses 6 times, it's going to trigger this dropper 6 times and this dropper 6 times, both of which will spit their items into the auto-crafting dropper and create an interesting pattern for us. So we throw our gunpowder into this one, we throw our sand into this one, press the button, we can see that we get our 6 pulses, and if we take a look inside of the auto-crafting dropper, we have the crafting recipe for TNT. Now, why did that work? Well, this comes down to update work. So the dropper in the back here is actually receiving priority over the dropper attached to the right side of this block. So for every pulse of this observer into this block, this dropper is firing once, followed then in the same tick by this dropper. So to go 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and then 5. But at that point, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, the dropper, or the auto-crafting dropper, is going to be full, meaning that nothing else can go into it, and the last firing of the sand is not actually going to happen. And if we slow the game down even further, we'll go every 2 ticks to clear this out. We can take a look at that happening in real time, so I'll click the button, and we can see that we have gunpowder sand, gunpowder sand, gunpowder sand, gunpowder sand, gunpowder, but there's no extra sand. No sand got spat out. This gunpowder is actually left over from breaking that dropper earlier. But the last sand didn't fire, which is good because we're left with this crafting recipe here. So all then that's left to turn this into a full autocrafter is to simply wire up the final trigger to fire the auto crafting dropper so that it will craft the final TNT. So go ahead and wire that up. Now, by adding just a little bit of delay between us pressing the button and we want to indirectly power the auto crafting dropper. Otherwise, if we changed this up and had a observer pulsing directly into it, what we would actually wind up doing is pulsing these two connected droppers one more time, which from an order of an operations perspective would actually be bad because we'd wind up with some extra items left over here. So what we're going to do is throw a block of iron on top. We're going to throw an observer powering that. We're going to take a signal off of the powered rail line, wire that up. And we can easily see that that's going to work, but just for posterity's sake, when we click the button, we can see that inside of our crafting dropper, we're filling up the recipe. In comes the signal from the powered rail. The recipe is full. The observers fire, and we are now left with an empty auto crafting dropper and TNT. And the footprint of this is relatively small. You could obviously compact this more and use some different mechanics if you wanted to. But for illustrating the principle at hand, which is using one pulse generator to actually generate a crafting recipe where the ingredients alternate one by one in that checkerboard-like pattern, I think this is cool. At least for what it's trying to do. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And in future episodes, we're going to start getting into some of the more exotic crafting recipes that involve placeholder items and signal strength, and combining that with the pulse-based generator recipes and contraptions that we've seen in the last two episodes. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you again. Bye.